Hey everybody, Nick Espinosa, your chief security fanatic here, and today is Sunday, so we are doing breaches of the week. That's right, we missed last week, but we are catching up for 2 weeks, and hopefully next week I will be bringing you as well. We're trying to get back into a little bit of consistency here. It has been nuts, as you know, if you follow me. Now, with that, I'd like to thank the following people that sent me this information in any which way, shape, or form that they did. It is always appreciated, and that would be Jason Dance, Barrett Peterson, and Richard Anderson. Guys, thank you so very much. And with that, let's dive right in because we have a lot to catch up on. And first things first, we are going to be talking about Okta and give you an update from their data breach from about 4 weeks ago or so, when this all started to break. Here's what's going on. Okta said Tuesday, April 19th, that it concluded an investigation into the January data breach, adding that, and I quote, "The impact of the incident was significantly less than the maximum potential impact that the company initially shared." That was part of a filing they did for the SEC. And in a filing with the US SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, on March 21, Okta also said a cybercrime group published screenshots online that were taken from a computer used by a customer support engineer who worked for a third-party vendor supplying customer service to Okta and its customers. Now, Okta determined that basically these screenshots were indeed related to that January incident experienced by that vendor, and a forensic firm engaged by the vendor conducted an investigation and told Okta that the incident is not ongoing and has been remediated. Now, if you recall, and if you follow me, as you know, I actually sat in on basically that giant meeting / webinar that the chief security officer of Okta essentially put together. And he said basically the same thing. So they are keeping their message in line, but apparently it was a huge bullet dodged for Okta, and that is good news for everybody, including their customers. Moving on, let's talk about Newman Regional Health in Kansas. They confirmed that they had a data breach stemming from basically what they're calling a hacking IT incident involving one or more organizational email accounts, meaning somebody probably got in. Now, while the details about the Newman Regional Health breach are still forthcoming, it appears that the information that was exposed could be up to 52,224 individuals. So we will see what's going on with there. But if you use Newman Regional Health in Kansas, heads up to you. Moving on, let's stick with healthcare and talk about SuperCare Health, a lawsuit filed basically against the in-home respiratory care provider SuperCare over a cyber attack and data breach. Basically, that was reported on March 28th, is now in the works. The potential incident involved exposure and potential theft of protected health information for 318,400 patients, including names, email addresses, birth dates, account numbers, medical record numbers, health insurance information, testing, diagnostic, treatment, and claims information, and more, as well as a subset of individuals who may have had their social security and or driver's license numbers exposed. SuperCare is basically, they said unauthorized individuals accessed their network between July 23rd through July 27th of last year, but did not disclose the nature of this attack until March of 2022. Hence the lawsuit. They're way past that deadline for HIPAA compliance. Moving on, let's talk about Sunwing Airlines. They are out of Canada. They're a budget airline from what I understand. They had to declare due to a third-party breach, and we'll get to that in a second. Now, thousands of people actually were stranded all this past week, basically in the destinations that they fly and Canadian airports as well, because of the data breach at Sunwing. Now, the problem began last weekend and was slowly evolving for basically the airline that connects Canadian destinations with the Caribbean, Mexico, and Central America. Basically, you want to go sit on the beach in Cancun and you're a Canadian, go fly Sunwing if you want a cheap ticket. Now, would-be flyers reported chaos and confusion with the lack of information on when their planes might leave. Remember, Sunwing had a breach. Nobody could get just information. Now, as a result of this breach, the airline actually had to check in passengers manually after the server networks belonging to their third-party service provider were compromised. That third-party service provider, and I don't know if we'll see more airlines declare, that was Airline Choice of Illinois. Obviously using an American company here in the state of Illinois, where I am, Chicago. Here we are. Now, with that, let's move on because we've got a ton to cover. Adaptive Health Integrations is next up. This appears to be a healthcare week, as well as a week of how not to handle a data breach, and we will get to that shortly. Now, Adaptive Health Integrations said they had a hacking incident that impacted 510,574 individuals, according to a sample breach notification letter that was posted to the Montana Attorney General's office website. An unauthorized individual may have accessed a limited amount of data on October 17 of last year. That's all I've got, but if you use adaptive health integrations for all your adaptive health integration needs, heads up to you. You may be part of that breach. Moving on, let's talk about Metro Health System in Ohio. Again, this is Healthcare Crazy Week. Some Metro Health System patients are being notified of a privacy breach affecting their records. About 1,700 patients were affected, according to a recent statement, and letters were mailed earlier this week. Now, here's what happened. On November 13th, of last year, during an upgrade to the health system's electronic medical record system, a limited number of patients, about 1,700 records, were unintentionally affected. When some patient records were released, data pertaining to different patients also appeared on those records, meaning you got upgraded. And if I was in that database, you might have saw my information, and if you were in that database, I might have seen yours. Now, patient names, appointment dates, and care provider names were the only information released. No personal, financial, or other health-related information was shared, so bullet dodged. The health system's medical record partner informed it of the breach on February 10th, and here we are in April. Moving on. Let's talk about Contra Costa County in the state of California. They are reporting a data breach that may have exposed the personal information located in the county's employee email system. Basically, an investigation determined that an unauthorized person accessed county employees' email accounts at various times between June 24th and August 12th of last year. Now, this breach exposed, quote, certain county employee emails, as well as individuals who had communicated with the county's Employment and Human Services Department. This information contained names, social security numbers, driver's license, or state-issued ID numbers, financial account numbers, passport numbers, and medical information and or health insurance information. So if you have basically contacted the Employment and Human Services Department of Contra County, California, heads up to you. You may eventually be entitled to compensation. Moving on, let's talk about the Churchill Mortgage Corporation in the state of Tennessee. They recently filed an official notice of data breach. Now, according to this official filing, the breach resulted from an unauthorized party gaining access to an employee's email account. Churchill Mortgage reported the names, social security numbers, and financial account numbers of certain individuals were accessible to this unauthorized party or parties, and on April 12th of this year, they provided a data breach notification letter to those who were affected. Not sure, but Churchill Mortgage has 800 employees, so fairly large. Heads up to you if you use them out of Tennessee. Moving on. Let's talk about Panasonic. Panasonic, their Canadian division. They got hit by a cyber attack in February that impacted internal systems, processes, and networks. Now, the Contra ransomware as a service gang allegedly claimed responsibility for this cyber attack and claimed to have more than 2.7 gigabytes of data from Panasonic Canada. Conti's leak page appeared to have Panasonic internal files, spreadsheets, and documents belonging to HR and accounting departments. Panasonic says that they are working to restore operations and understand how this basically impacted their customers, employees, and stakeholders, while making it a priority to work closely with affected parties to mitigate the effects of this cyber attack. Now, this is basically the second time in less than 6 months for Panasonic. In November 2021, if you recall, they confirmed that a third party had illegally accessed their network and data, so hopefully Panasonic can get it together. In this case, Panasonic Canada. Moving on, let's talk about Rideau Hall in Canada as well, this time Ottawa. Newly disclosed documents revealed the breach of an internal computer network at Rideau Hall and was basically described to senior government officials as a sophisticated cyber incident. There you go. Now, according to internal government emails obtained by Canadian press, they also say that officials were, quote, unable to confirm the full extent of the information that was accessed. In a basically December 2 news release, the Office of the Secretary to the Governor General said there was, quote, an unauthorized access to its internal network, and also that it was working basically on this investigation with the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity. And so there you go. If you have anything to do with Rideau Hall in Ottawa, Canada, the capital of all of Canada, heads up to you. Moving on, let's talk about wind turbine company Nordex. The Contra ransomware gang claimed responsibility for a cyber attack on Nordex which forced basically them to shut down their systems and remote access to turbines and all those kinds of things. They obviously remotely managed their turbines. They couldn't get access thanks to Conti. Now, Nordex is one of the largest developers of wind turbines, globally, with more than 8,500 employees. And on April 2nd, Nordex disclosed that they had suffered a cyber attack that was detected early, and they shut down their IT systems basically out of caution to prevent the spread or the continuation of this attack. So heads up to you, Nordex employees, Nordex windmills, anybody that is possibly watching or listening to this that has anything to do with Nordex. And finally, and we have two big finalies for you, and I'm basically calling this the umbrella of how not to handle a data breach. And for that, we're going to start with Japanese cosmetic giant Shiseido. Now, basically the UK branch of Shiseido has reportedly fallen victim to a data breach involving the personal details belonging to hundreds of former and current employees. Basically, they have been accused of failing to notify the affected staff that their data, including address information, passports, and ID images, bank details, and more, had actually been stolen. Several employees have reported being victims of fraud, with their personal data being used to open up fraudulent businesses, as well as take out bank loans and insurance, according to testimonies obtained by beauty industry watchdog known as Estee Laundry, which I assume is a play on Estee Lauder, which to me is pretty amusing. Now, Shiseido's management and HR department had reportedly, quote, denied responsibility, refusing to contact ex-employees to alert them. Quote, we have to contact ex-colleagues and staff ourselves, one anonymous source told Estee Laundry, adding that the company's HR and legal teams, quote, refused to offer any help. This has resulted in some victims of the breach being forced to take on basically these criminals themselves and to cover expenses of having their names cleared, their identities restored, all these kinds of things. Now, after discovering in March that their personal information had been used to open fraudulent businesses, another anonymous employee was forced to, quote, pay court fees to get themselves removed from the company. Another former employee said that they had, quote, spent over a month deleting and deactivating accounts while not knowing that the scammers had actually managed to obtain their personal data. In both cases, the victims were ultimately notified about the data breach by a former Shiseido colleague. The incident basically is said to have been limited to their UK branch. Now, Shiseido wasn't available for comment on these allegations per the reporting that I read. If confirmed, this would obviously be the second mass data breach involving cosmetic company, specifically this cosmetic company, in the last 6 years, following a 2016 case that saw the personal details of over 420,000 of their customers leaked. The data obtained by the attackers then included credit card information belonging to 56,000 users who had made purchases from Shiseido's online store. Basically, that is obviously a huge problem. And so this is essentially not what to do in a data breach, especially internal to your employees. Transparency is key. Communication is key. The one thing that is lost in a data breach, and I've said this over and over and over to audiences around the globe, is basically trust. You lose trust. People lose confidence in your brand. And if you are basically the employee of a company and that company gets breached, employee data is essentially hit, the best thing they can do is help their employees as much as humanly possible while being transparent. No business wants to go through this. There's time, money, energy, all these things are lost, but nevertheless, protecting your employees as well as your customers is a beyond important thing. And if you are lying to them saying this didn't happen or you're trying to cover it up, your employees are going to leave. And our next one basically underscores why basically customers should leave when they are not disclosed of a data breach on a tech platform that they use. And we are wrapping this up with T-Mobile. Now, here's what's going on, and this is a complete mess. Heads up, T-Mobile subscribers. Last year, T-Mobile confirmed that it was breached after attackers offered to sell the personal data of 30 million of its customers for 6 Bitcoin, which was around $270,000 at that time. Now, according to court documents unsealed the other day that were reviewed by Motherboard by Vice, a third party hired by T-Mobile tried to pay the attackers for exclusive access to that data, and to limit the attackers from leaking that data more widely. In ransomware events, usually the people say, we want X amount of money and we will not release your data. If not, here we are. Now, the plan ultimately failed, and the criminals continued to sell the data despite the third party giving them a total of about $200,000 US. But the news unearthed some of the controversial tactics that might have been used by companies as they respond to data breaches, either to mitigate the leak of stolen information or in an attempt to identify who has breached their network. Now, T-Mobile did not respond to a request for comment whether it was aware that this third party it had hired had paid the cyber criminals hundreds of thousands of dollars to stop leaking their data. And this past Tuesday, the Department of Justice unsealed an indictment against Diogo Santos Coelho, and it alleges that he is the administrator of a popular hacking site known as Raid Forums. Law enforcement also uploaded a banner to the Raid Forums site announcing that they had taken over that domain, basically putting Raid Forums out of business. It's a place where a lot of people go to broker information, no more. Now, according to the indictment documents, and this is where it gets interesting, and T-Mobile is involved in this, and I quote, on or about August 11, 2021, an individual using the moniker Subvert posted on Raid Forums website an offer to sell the recently hacked data with the following title, and I'm going to paraphrase this because it's nerd speak, but basically the title is Selling 124 Million USA Social Security Date of Birth Driver's License Database Freshly Breached. Now, another post confirmed that the data belonged to, quote, a major telecommunications company and wireless network operator that provides services in the United States. Now, essentially, T-Mobile secretly bought its customer data from attackers to try and stop it from leaking, and that obviously failed. Now, on top of this, T-Mobile was once again in the news for cybersecurity woes this past week or two. An ongoing phishing campaign targeting T-Mobile customers with malicious links using unblockable text sent via SMS, aka text messages, and group messages. Now, the New Jersey Cybersecurity and Communications Integration Cell, or NJCCIC, which is part of the Department of Homeland Security, issued a warning after multiple customers started filing reports of being targeted by these new phishing campaigns known as smishing. Now, the phishing texts basically thank the recipient for paying their T-Mobile bill and then ask them to open a malicious link that will redirect them to a gift. Quote, the messages vary, but typically thank the recipient for paying their bill and offer a gift. The message includes a link to accept the gift. These links may lead to malicious websites intending to steal account credentials or personal information or install malware. In March, a similar series of smishing attacks also targeted Verizon Wireless and Spectrum customers, impersonating the carriers and text messages spoofed to look like they had been sent from the target's phone number. The Federal Trade Commission also warned consumers to watch out for scammers sending texts and numbers. Now, basically, this has been an ongoing problem for T-Mobile since they've had multiple data breaches. Let me just put it that way. And since 2018, when info belonging to 3% of T-Mobile customers was accessed by attackers, T-Mobile disclosed 5 other data breaches. So basically, since 2018, they've had 5 data breaches they've had to disclose to groups or organizations like the SEC. So think about this. In 2019, T-Mobile exposed prepaid customers' data, while in March 2020, attackers gained access to T-Mobile employee email accounts. In December of 2020, they also gained access to customer proprietary network information, such as phone numbers, call records, all that kind of stuff. 1 year later, in February of 2021, which actually is only a few months after December of 2020, in February 2021, basically attackers accessed an internal T-Mobile application. Several months later, in August of 2021, attackers brute forced their way in through T-Mobile's network after breaching the carrier's testing environments. And in December of 2021, T-Mobile confirmed that basically the August data breach was linked to the SIM swap attack notifications that were sent to a, quote, very small number of customers. Now, last month, the New York State Office of the Attorney General also warned victims of T-Mobile's August 2021 data breach that they're now facing increased identity theft risks after some of their stolen information ended up for sale on the dark web. Now, understand a couple of different things. One, when you're a massive corporation, in this case T-Mobile or Verizon, or think about any Fortune 100 level multi-billion-dollar corporation, you are under constant attack 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, which means it behooves you to maintain vigilance. And if T-Mobile essentially is having these data breaches and they are not directly informing the public, or they are taking too long, or they, in the case that I just literally talked about, they are trying to essentially obfuscate this, meaning we're going to pay the attackers not to have this information go out, you are eroding that trust. The trust I talked about with the Shiseido data breach in the UK. These are huge, huge things. It's the reason why I don't use Uber anymore. A few years ago, I believe it was around 2018, Uber basically had a massive data breach that basically saw an attacker steal something like 60 to 80 million stored credit cards, accounts, all this kind of stuff. And basically Uber tried to cover this up by paying the attacker not to release the information. And here we are. We now know about this. Whistleblowers Blue basically whistles all about this. We really started understanding Uber's negative culture internally at their executive level, all these kinds of things. But what happens is, you undermine the confidence of the consumers. And it's not just your product. This kind of undermining spreads everywhere, meaning we start to basically say we cannot trust major providers. And that includes everybody, even those that are really on the ball, mitigating these kinds of threats, taking it very seriously, and being very vigilant. So this basically poisons the well for everybody. And that's a huge problem that we've got. So by virtue of that, if you are, a T-Mobile customer, heads up to you, especially if you've been a long-term customer, they've had a lot of data breaches. And that's not to say that the others haven't. Verizon's had data breaches where they've misconfigured things, all those kinds of things. We are human at the end of the day, which is our biggest problem in cybersecurity. But the point is that you cannot obfuscate this information. Basically, understanding that you have to wade through essentially what's going to be hell is important. You're going to have to be communicative. You're going to have to be transparent. It's the only way to retain customers. It's the only way to continue to build trust. And there you go. And those companies that have traditionally been very transparent, very forthcoming, delivering reports on exactly what happened, are those companies I know that are taking it seriously, but they're taking my personal data seriously as well. T-Mobile proves, by virtue of what they are doing, that they don't. You shouldn't be a T-Mobile customer in that vein then. And so those were your breaches of the week. Were you affected? If you were a T-Mobile customer, you definitely were. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please stay private. Thanks, everyone.